Today, we're pleased to welcome Brandon Tourtelotte and Harry Leong, who will be presenting Extending ArcGIS with Customized Apps That Don't Require Code. Brandon is an account manager with GIS and is based in Minneapolis. He's a graduate of the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and has been an active member of Minnesota's GIS community throughout his career. He's also recently passed on the GIS torch to his son, who has started a GIS internship with the city of Plymouth. So congratulations to him too. And with that, I'll turn things over to Brandon for his presentation.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Now the fun starts. All right, you see my slide?
Yep, we can see it.
Yes.
Perfect. Sounds good. Yeah, again, thanks, Aaron, for this opportunity. It's good to be with you all. This is a really, this is a great idea. mAppetites, we all take a little break out of our lunch hour and learn a little something about, trends in the industry and things that are going on. And so presumably right now you all are eating your tuna fish sandwich, whatever you have going for lunch, and we're going to talk at you for a little while and kind of educate you a little bit about some of the trends in the industry. So I'm looking forward to the next one of these. So like you heard, my name is Brandon Tourtelotte. My son is now a GIS intern, so I'm really happy about that. Just kind of getting his start in the workforce. We are going to talk about extending ArcGIS with customized apps, but that don't require code. So my partner in crime today is my colleague Harry Leung. Harry, if you want to introduce yourself to the crowd.
Hi, everybody. My name is Harry Leung. So I'm a solutions engineer and partner in crime for Brandon here, just to share with you some of the stuff that we can do in Verge Studio. Turning it back over to you, Brandon.
Thanks. All right. So, and this is definitely intentionally kind of informal, right? So we're prepared,
Mhm.
but this is not going to be overly scripted, right? So this is more of a conversation. But what I want to do, even on this first slide, is kind of get your minds in the right frame of reference. Like, what are we talking about today, right? You're probably working on something completely different than this before you got on the meeting. So, what is the general topic here? And then we'll kind of dive into what we're going to say about it. I always find that's helpful. Generally
Mhm.
speaking, what are we talking about here? So, if you're like most organizations on the call, you probably have implemented ArcGIS as that system of record, managing your geospatial data, publishing your data out as web services, web maps, and then that in turn hydrates various both internal and public facing GIS apps. But when it comes to the development and the deployment of those apps themselves, if you struggle to get users to let's say across the enterprise to use those apps for various reasons, you're not alone, right? So you're serving a lot of departments, each of which have their own very complex workflows, existing business systems, requirements. All that has to be integrated. And in many cases, there's a gap between the ArcGIS configurable apps and those more sophisticated requirements. So today we're going to talk about the technology that exists for non-developers, okay, to configure apps that do meet all the requirements, not just some of the requirements, not just 80/20, but all of them, while doing so inside of ArcGIS Online or Portal. And so when I say non-developers, it really does mean what you think it would mean, which is it means custom code or coding, and the ability to code is not required. So I'm going to dive right in here. Now, the first slide I'm going to show is about our company, which I normally wouldn't do or certainly wouldn't do right away, but I'm actually doing it for a very specific reason. So bear with me. So if you've never heard of Vertigis before, this might jog your memory. So you may have heard of a company called Latitude Geographics and a product called GeoCortex. So if that sounds familiar, you're welcome. So you kind of have the idea. We are of the same lineage as that company, but we are now known as Vertigis. So we've been around for a while, but the name of Vertigis might be the part that's unfamiliar to you. But in a sense, you know who we are. So what's going on the screen here is we're doing well as a company. We have thousands of employees, hundreds of employees, and thousands of customers. We're all over North America, Western Europe, all over the world, really. We have partners and so forth. We're actually kind of similar to Esri in that way, although we're much smaller than them. As you would imagine, as an Esri partner, where we have specialties, we have awards. But on this slide, really the most important thing to draw your attention to, which is why I put it on the screen, is that in the Esri Partner Network, we are at the highest tier, which is platinum. So I don't know if you know this, but there's gold partners, there's different levels, there's many thousands of partners, but as a platinum partner, that means we're one of a pretty select few. So let's say there's a large handful, I think less than 20 or so of those partners. And the reason I emphasize that is because that means that we are aligned and work with Esri at the highest levels, which means that the thing I'm about to say in the next slide are not intended at all to be derogatory statements about ArcGIS and the configurable apps. They're actually all factual statements. We have no business reason to say negative things about ArcGIS. These are just simply true, and they help to set up the rest of the presentation as far as kind of what we're talking about. So know that we are a platinum partner of Esri. And now I will say that when we think about the ArcGIS configurable apps, which if you're unclear what we mean by that, it's these, right? So this is Field Maps, Experience Builder, the ArcGIS Solutions, Survey 123, dashboards, and so on. So the thing about these is that these are the out-of-the-box apps that they offer, and the reality is they don't cover all the business workflows that are out there, right? So when you really have some complex requirements, they just don't get you all the way there. In many cases, the alternative is custom software development, and that has a lot of baggage, right? Because that tends to be kind of costly, slow to develop, and it's also hard to maintain, right? When ArcGIS pushes out quarterly updates and so forth, custom apps, custom widgets can be hard to continue to maintain. The code breaks, has to be redone, and so forth. And in our experience, what we see is that, like, ultimately, why does that matter? Well, because of that, or as a result of that, departments they disengage when those workflows aren't really tailored to everything that they do. Certain users kind of unplug, right? So if this doesn't do what I need it to do, I'm not going to use it. So you have kind of more, it limits the user adoption, the utilization of ArcGIS licenses, kind of using it at that enterprise level. And because we're a platinum partner, we meet with Esri in person, as you could imagine, and they certainly will agree that these are all factual statements. This is it's no secret. This is public information. And in many cases, if you're looking to do something that's not supported out of the box, if you talk to your Esri account manager, they will often say, yeah, that's something that's not supported out of the box. They might actually recommend custom software development as well. So that kind of gives you a sense for the challenge we're talking about here is what about when you need to do more than the configurable apps really cause, or really support rather, and what they offer. All right, so try to be very visual here. If you're like me, I like to see things and it makes more sense this way. So taking a lot of what I just said, those words, and putting them into pictures, and I don't know if this resonates with you, but you think about in that spectrum of the development time, right? So you have some of the out-of-box apps that are just ready to go, they're out of the box. The configurable apps that I just spoke to, if you have more sophisticated requirements that exceed, so we're now kind of going to the right on my diagram of those configurable apps, at the other end of the spectrum would be, well, if you have something that really does call for custom software development, that's one thing. But what about if there was another way to fit that gap, short of going with custom coding where you're hiring a developer and so on and so forth? And that's really where we're going with this is how do we develop that or address and leverage that custom development gap? What about if there was a way or a platform and a series of no-code and low-code app builders, which is what we're going to show today, that will actually meet that requirement that fits between those two, shortens that time to value, and enables you to create apps that don't have that issue of maintaining them over time. So ArcGIS updates, when you build it in a no-code, low-code, fully supported app builder, that app that you're creating could be a web app, could be a mobile app, it could be an experience builder widget, keeps on working even with those changes to ArcGIS. I think you'd agree that if that was possible, that would be very effective and kind of addresses a concern and a challenge that we all have, or that many of us have. All right, so we're going to stay visual here. Here's another diagram, and I'm going to walk through it. So if you follow me, what you heard me say earlier was that we're able to do what I'm describing, but all the while staying inside of the ArcGIS environment, staying inside of ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Well, if that's actually the case, it seems like we owe you a kind of a visual representation, like a solution diagram of exactly how does one do that? How do you do something inside of ArcGIS Online while also using an extended third-party piece of software that's technically separate from ArcGIS Online? So this is where all of you are currently, right? So you're creating your published web maps, your web scenes in ArcGIS Online and or portal. You're doing it with your creator user types. So that's kind of that's your current situation. You already have that as your system of record. We're going to start on the journey where we have different application frameworks. Okay, so these are the actual builders that Harry will show. And this is something that is hosted by our company, Vertigis, which enables you to deploy based on your use case. So today you need a web application, or maybe you need something that works inside of, when we say desktop, we mean ArcGIS Pro. Also included in this grouping of three, it's not shown on the screen, but your use case could be deploying as a widget inside of Experience Builder. That is also a use case, or a mobile app. So we're going to use an application framework to build the app in one of those. And once we've done that, we store that app as an app configuration, Vertigis app configuration inside of ArcGIS Online or Portal. So once we've got that, then the magic continues like so. So we got the app, we got a mobile app, let's say, or a web application, and now we're going to add to that app various capabilities. So we want to be able to search or do printing or create custom or complex workflows or reporting or linear asset management with Inline. We're going to do those types of things. We're going to drag and drop and make it into a very robust and powerful application. But how does that get tied into what we built and we stored in ArcGIS Online? All of those items also get stored as actual Vertigis items. So the reason you see creator user type at the top is because you need that in order to be able to author and save items in ArcGIS Online, right? So we know that part. So we created the application framework. We added cool capabilities to that. That all got stored as an item in ArcGIS Online and an overarching app configuration. And so in that way, we've actually built an app inside of ArcGIS Online, but using these builders that are inherently integrated inside of your ArcGIS. And then, of course, we deploy those, right? So we deploy those out to the various user types that you have in the field. So your viewers, your contributors, your mobile workers. And then presumably in your organization, you might have some sort of a controlling mechanism. So how you control access to the different published web services, the scenes, the apps themselves over a given geography, or which of your users can access all of that, all those bits of information. If you don't have any way to control that access, this is purely a side note, but I will mention that we do have a specific product called Access Control that gives you that fine-grained access and user permission, gives you the ability to control user permission and access to the apps or to the data inside of it, down to the schema and that sort of thing. Not the focus of this presentation, but that's why I put a logo up on the screen, is to represent access control. And then overarching the whole thing is you might be using ArcGIS Monitor or something to monitor the performance, right, of your ArcGIS Online or your enterprise in this case, and also something to monitor how much are your users using. So my scenario is we're using this to create some cool apps, push them out to everyone at the bottom of the screen, but then are they using those apps, right? And not just are they hitting the app, but which buttons inside the app are they actually clicking on? So you get a sense of, well, we designed the UX, but we're finding that certain buttons aren't getting used and things like that. If you don't have anything that does that, here again, not the focus of the presentation, but Vertigis actually has another product called Analytics, and that's what that icon is there to represent. But the big takeaway on this slide should be that this hopefully gives you a plausible scenario that we really do mean it when we say it's possible to build apps and have them, and you're not siloing anything. So you're not using this and creating these cool apps in something outside of the ArcGIS you already have, but instead you're staying right there. And I'll hand things off to Harry in just a second here, but just to show you, like, we really do mean it when we say that this is tightly integrated into ArcGIS Online, let's say, if you're using it that way. So much so, and this is something that Harry's demo kind of starts right after the login screen. So this is why I'm showing it on the screen to you all right now. So the user is required, when you log into one of these low-code, no-code app builders that I'm alluding to, it does ask you for your ArcGIS Online identity, your user type, and that's required to log in. Because you're using this to create items in your ArcGIS Online, that's why you have to have a creator user type, which is a universal ArcGIS property. And so really and truly, when you log in the kind of the main screenshot that I have here on the slide on the right, that will look familiar to you, right? That's how the people that are on the call, that's how you're logging into ArcGIS currently. Is you're using, or you might be using it that way anyway, username and password. So you're putting in your identity. And that really emphasizes visually that then all content is stored inside of the organization that your username is tied to, right? You log in with that. The builder is now looking inside of that organization, and that's storing everything essentially the slide I put on, the diagram and the slide I put on before this, that speaks to what organization that's all going to happen inside of. So just wanted to really kind of visually enforce this because it's pretty unique. All right, and with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand things over to Harry. So what he's going to do is to actually kind of do a moving picture show, if you will, for a lot of the kind of the words and the concept diagrams that I was just showing, and really just kind of show in practice what does this look like, and how do we make these statements about these no-code, low-code apps that do complex things.
Great. I'm just gonna take over here. Excuse me, Brandon. Let me get this bar out the way first. Okay. Okay. So yeah, so as Brandon said, this is our like demo organization, and so I've already signed in with our demo identity. Just hide that. So this is our demo portal, and so we have the links to our core product suite. So we have access to some of our builders here. So I'm going to talk mainly about the core four, which is going to be web, workflow over here, and the output components, which is reporting and printing. And so yeah, these are the main ones that we're going to talk about, and all of the applications that you're going to see today are built using these four. And just to reiterate about where we sit in relation to Esri, all of the content that we build is in the same place that your web map would be, right? It's all still ArcGIS Online or Enterprise, right? So all the content, all the apps, all the workflows are all here. And even beginning from starting from scratch, our web map is here as well. But I'm not really going to demo that today. I'm just going to jump into our sample experience builder to give you a little bit of taste of when you mix and match some of our tools and or even put it into a different environment, right? Excuse me. So when you have an experience builder, you get the standard out of the box functionality to interact with your web map data. Right, so when you come in, right, you can come in and view a lot of like the details that you might have. So this one is, for this example, it's the city of Victoria. We have some buildings, and in that buildings layer, we have some feature information about those buildings. And with that, we can actually implement a workflow widget to help us search through some of those layers, right? So in this case, we have a search function to help standardize that process, make it a little bit more robust and make it a little bit easier and more accessible for some of the users. So in this case, instead of using a traditional SQL search query or a spatial query, we've already lined that up inside of the workflow designer. And so all the user has to do is identify which type of search they want to run. So we have a few here using the address of the feature, or the selection, or using a selection option on the map here as well. Or in the final case here, we can actually interact with the map using a buffer. So you can see with this interactive form, I've already selected my point, and now what's left is to actually determine the size of that buffer. So in this case, I'm going to max that out, put it to 500 feet, or if I want to change it, I can change it over to meters. So I'm going to run the search. It's going to grab all the building parcels here. So I've gotten about 20 here in the form, right? So as I flip through, I can select a couple of these, right? Just to run this report. I can pick and choose which ones I want to run. Some of them might not be very relevant. So I can generate that report. And now we just have to wait for it. But in the interest of time, I've already pre-created this report here. And so this is just a taste of what this would look like as the output. So when you run this report, or when you run this workflow and generate that report, you are really essentially just sending a feature ID over to the workflow, and the workflow will pass that along to the reporting template. And the reporting template will fill out the relevant information that you've already pre-selected inside the designer. And so in that case, it will identify, in our case, it will identify the map extent for the feature and identify some critical element or critical attributes for this report. So we have the type of the building, the height and elevation, where it's located. But this can change depending on how you want to set it up. It can change depending on what layer you're working with. We can add different graphical elements like a chart, or we can add even like sub-reports. So if we were selecting this building and we wanted to relate that to maybe work permits or the underlying parcel, get some tax assessment values, we can actually include that in a sub-report in this report. So, and I'll show you an example of that later on. And because I selected multiple features in this case, it will actually put all that inside of the single report. So it's generating this report for you at scale, and you don't no longer have to worry about, oh, am I selecting the right features? Do I have to define a report for each one? Is this going to be a standardized output? All of that is pre-configured inside of workflow and reporting, right? So going back to the Experience Builder app, that would be the first workflow widget. So now we can go over to the printing widget, and this is a little bit different from the out of the box options here. So if I click on this template, which is a pre-designed template to capture some of the map details here. So we get the viewfinder, and so we can just drag this viewfinder over to wherever location we want to print this map. And we can also use the widget here to modify things like the scale, right? So if I wanted to set a hard extent for the scale at 4,500, or maybe even a little bit bigger further out, I can do that. And it will adjust if I'm playing with the map, if I'm moving it with the scroll wheel on my mouse here. I can also do things like, adjust the rotation of the map, right? A little bit disorientating, but this is going to be what's captured on the map report. And I can also add different parameters into the text box here for the title and as well as the notes. So I can mark it as something that's created by me. It's created by me in the notes here, August 12th or August 13th, and then run that print. So again, in the interest of time, I'm just going to jump over to our output here. So in this case, it's a different extent, but it's the same idea, right? So I've captured the extent of the map that I was looking for in the viewfinder, and then the rest of it is controlled via the print template. So it's going to capture all this information, and the print template already knows what types of layers are featured on the map, right? So in this case, it's just the buildings, and so it would only identify the buildings, despite the fact that we have other layers available inside of this application. And the rest of the elements are also configurable, so you can include things like an overview map of where this is located. You can change things in the title, as I showed you before. You can customize the branding. So it's very flexible in how you want to structure this, either the print or even the reporting. And that's really the point of these Vertigis products, right? And so that is where we excel, and this is where we come in and to add some extra value in some of these applications. So moving on to web, right? To give you the full suite of what Vertigis does, I'm going to show you the same app inside of Vertigis in Vertigis Web, right? So we've taken the web map and we just put it inside of Vertigis Web. And in this case, because it's integrated inside of all of our products, they integrate a little bit more seamlessly. There's reports can be accessed a little bit more elegantly, right? So that's my favorite example. So I can actually just click directly on the map here, and through the results details, right? So I have access to the same details that you've configured on the web map, right? So all the same data, the building elevation, the height, all that information. But I've been able to configure in Vertigis the web designer, I've been able to configure a direct call out for the buildings report. All right, so in this case, it's the same report, right? It's the same report as this, but I can now let the user directly call that from a map action. Right, and I still have the same workflow, right? If I go back to the tools, I still have that search, right? It's the same idea, but now it's built inside of Vertigis Web. So I can just click that. This is same idea, highlight on the map, same report, right? It's, you're picking and choosing which elements you want to include. And from there, I'm going to show you another type of workflow that we have here, right? So this is sort of the opposite end now, right? Like now you're creating new features, and this just wasn't something that we included inside the Experience Builder, but it's still an option. So I can now create a hydrant. So this would be like an example of you're creating like any sort of point or polygon feature. You can do that as well. And so you created the actual feature location here. You can see that on the form. And now I can actually fill out this form. And in this example, it's just going to create the feature, but you can also link that with other external systems like CityWorks or Maximo. And so we have that ability to integrate with those external systems. So I'm just going to add this feature here. Right, so I have all the data that I filled out here, and I also have the ability to add any file attachments if I wanted to. So that's another thing that you can configure. And so that's how you would actually start to create and work with the data inside of this application. And then going on beyond that, now we're going to get into the web designer and how we actually configure stuff like this. So I'm going to give you a little taste of what it takes to put this stuff together. So it's a little bit of sleight of hand here because I'm using a different app, but it's it's usually just better practice to make changes inside of our main demo environment instead of like our sample apps. So the idea here is that this is a low code environment. So if I go back out to the tree here, the components list, what we have is like the structure of all the things that you see on the screen here. And by moving the elements or adding new elements into the map, I can actually change the layout and the behavior of this application. So for example, if I wanted to add a new legend onto the map, right, I can add a new map element just simply by dragging and dropping this into the map, right? And so it's appeared behind our components list here, but it's immediately accessible for the end user. Once I save this and open the app again, it'll be there. And other things that we can add are panels and other tools like that, like a panel page here. Just add that into another part of the application. And so you can see I have another panel so I can add more content onto the map. So it's totally up to me on how I want to make changes to this application. So for this example, I'm just going to add another text box, right, just to show you what that looks like. Get that to stick there. Okay. So in this case, right, I might add another title, right? And immediately I can see the changes that I've made to my application, right? So there's a little change of here. And the other thing that we can do in Verges Web is start to configure those tools, right? So similar to what we can do in Experience Builder, now we can configure workflows and reports. So as I showed you before with the map feature action, I can actually access that report from here, right? So I would have to go into the map feature. And so this will show us a little bit about the web map under the hood, right? So this is where we actually select the map the web map that we would want, and this is how we would change what types of data that we're working with. I'm just going to move out of that menu here. So I'm going to go into the transportation, or move into the tax parcel layer. And so you can see that we also have a bunch of toggles, and this will also control the level of like interaction that the user gets to experience inside the application. So like things like identifying features or querying, so they can control you can control things like that from there. And so this is where we implement the report, right? So this is adding a new menu item, and we have a few commands out of the box, right? So if we wanted to, we can add a buffer results page, right, or a buffer results feature inside the menu, right? But we can also add things like reports, like a report in a local demo. So this is not configured for this feature, but just as an example, I can add that in, and that would link to the report item. And lastly, I can actually add a workflow. So we have a bunch existing here, but I can also create one from a template. So we have a few templated reports that I can generate, and I'm going to use a similar one to the standard buffer results, right? Buffer geometry here. I'm going to add that in. So that would give us another workflow. And once I click another parcel here, all of those things will be available inside the menu, and I can access that from the feature results. Let's minimize this for a sec. Right, so all those features are now accessible immediately. And once I save that, those changes will be ready to go, right? And from there, I can even do things like a deployment pipeline, right? So this is another thing that I always like to mention in some of these demos is the ability to separate a development version for your builders and a production version for your end user. So that just adds an extra degree of separation for the developers and the users. So you never end up pushing a feature that's not ready to the end user and affecting their end user experience. So let me just quickly show you what our buffer looks like, just to give you an example of the templated one. So right now we have a simple buffer. We have identified a parcel. We can now use the buffer workflow to generate a buffer distance. So I can choose any of the units here. I can type in a new buffer distance if I wanted to, and just run submit, right? Identify that buffer on the feature on the map. But if I wanted to make a change in that, I have to go into the workflow designer. So I can just click it from here. And so as Brandon mentioned, we have to sign in with our ArcGIS identity into the workflow designer. So just let me do that here while we wait. So this is a templated version. And essentially with workflow, it really is just another low code interface to design the workflow model. And it's the same low code system across the board, right? In web, workflow, reporting, printing. It's just dragging and dropping new elements into the preview menu here. And just in this case, and for workflow, you would be adding that component into the model here. Right, so the thing that I added right now is a prompt. So let's just pretend that in this case, I wanted to add a password authentication for the end user, right? So in this case, I would add a password. Default text would be the input text box. I could, and then I'll add a title here, password. And now, so I've added a new feature, and all I have to do is just click save, right? And so you'll see that we have a bunch of different tools here available. So a lot of that is like logic, right? If statements or modifying the app behavior, changing things on the map, showing different panels, and all the different tools that you might need to integrate in order to fine tune that business process. So it's a very versatile tool for your builders to design something unique and very specific for the end user. So I've saved that, and so we can actually see that new prompt inside of the application. So I'm going to open the application that we have saved right now, and you'll see the change that I've made from the workflow. And I do have a couple of things left to show you here. Oh, again, I have to sign in again. Okay, so with our workflow, that's going to be off of a feature action. So I'm going to call that by just clicking a parcel. Right, go into the results menu and you'll see them all. Right, so I'm just going to run a quick buffer. And if I need to authenticate myself, right, I just type in a password. Nothing's happening, nothing, it's not connected, to do any work, right? It's just a blank text box. So, and now we'll get our buffer, right? So that's just a quick example of what it takes to actually make a change and implement a workflow inside of your map, and how quickly it is to actually get it running inside of the live application. One last thing I think I have the time to quickly show you is printing. So I'm going to go into our print function here. Give it a second to load. Hmm. Oh. Seems like my internet is giving me a little trouble today. Try it on this side.
Live demos. Don't try this at home. This is like a cooking show,
There we go.
We try to
There we
take it
go.
out of the oven.
Oh, right. Okay. I will demo it on this side. I'm going to I'm going to minimize this. I need a little bit more real estate here. So this is our printout. So we can start with our single page, similar to what we saw in Experience Builder. But what we have also available is the line and the grid printout. So here I can actually do this in a more linear fashion, right? So if we're working on roadway projects, we usually have to do multiple printouts at once. This just makes it a little bit more convenient compared to the single page. And you can see as I drew this line, it's going to pop up with 4 more pages here. And from there, all I have to do is fill out my parameters, maybe make modifications to the map if I wanted to. All right, so I'm just going to add a few notes. Just to give you an example here. And again, because Brandon, as Brandon mentioned, because this is a bit of a cooking show, I'm just going to open one of our prints here. Oh, these are our grid prints. So I might really go back and show you those as well. So I'm going to turn this over to a grid print. So the grid print is a similar concept, right? You can define the number of cells you have on the printout, right? So in this case, it's just a simple 2x2. My parameters can be changed, but I'm going to leave them as the same. All you do have to do is just run print, right? And then from there, as I hide the controls again, you would get something like this, right? You would get the overview map, how many pages you have you captured and printed out. And you'll see that in this case, I've made a few markups here. So you can see I create a polygon, or I'll use this one. This is a little bit better. I've created a polygon. I've made some measurements. So all these markups that you made inside the map can be added back into the printout as well. So everything you draw live in the application will get captured and sent along to the print job as well. So again, it's a very easy way to integrate that into the application, and it's also going to make it a little bit easier to connect that with all the markups that you're making. So from there, I'm just going to quickly show creating a project, right? So this is one more thing. So if you have to, save your work and you have to come back to it after lunch, for example, you can actually just save your project, right? Just give it a title. It'll save that JSON file for you, right? So you can see I've created a JSON file and it's going to be in my downloads folder, and all I have to do is just load it back in. So I can do that from there, or I can go into the shared projects menu. So right now, no project is loaded, but I'm going to add the one that I've just saved. Downloads, so this one, put that up. So it's going to kick me out, and it's going to make me come back to the shared projects folder. And now I just have to give it, a description for the project name, and I can access that. So in this case, I can also control what types of people are groups that have access to it. So we'll say I wanted to add some of my coworkers here. They can have visibility on this as well. Or, in this case, I might just share it as a read only. Don't really want them to edit that. Okay, so I'm just going to save that right now. And so we have a bunch of these examples inside the share projects list. I might have clicked that a little bit too fast. Okay. Right, but ours is down here. Right, so I can jump back to that at any time that I want to. And so these are, just some of the quality of life features that we have available in Vertigis, and just making that accessing that GIS and interacting with it, just a little bit more convenient. And yeah, so that was just a quick taste of it. I'm just going to hand things over back to Brandon and let him take it from here.
That sounds good. All right. And you notice, just to state the obvious, there we go. Just to state the obvious, with everything that Harry just showed, he wasn't writing any code, right? For developers in the room, if you're wondering what kind of sorcery this is all JavaScript 4.x, so it's writing all the JavaScript in the background. Aaron and Kristen, I promise we're wrapping up here. So I'm just going to quickly say, for anyone that is subject to ADA compliance, if you need to be at that goal by the goal of next April 2027, the platform you just saw is fully compliant with the WCAG, the WCAG 2.2 AA, which is the relevant technical specification for ADA compliance. So this helps you avoid having to build any custom accessibility tools. I don't know if that resonates with you or not. There was a question about who's using this. So in Minnesota, currently, these are the two main users. So everyone knows Logis. You probably know who Logis is, as well as the city of Brooklyn Park. So Logis, Jessica Fendos, she's always happy to talk about this. She may even be on the call, I'm not sure. Brooklyn Park, you may know John Nergi. John and I will actually be presenting on how they use this internally at the city at the GIS LIS conference in the fall. One of you had asked about state agencies. So there's no Minnesota state agencies currently using this, but I will mention that our neighbor to the east, yes, we have a friendly rivalry, but Wisconsin DNR uses this throughout all their GIS operations, or the majority of their apps are built using Vertigis Studio, their internal ones and also the public ones. I don't know if you've ever looked at their habitat maps and so forth, but those are mostly built with Vertigis Studio. So compliance, this is who's using it, and that's it. So if you're curious to learn more, I know Aaron has some announcements. We may have some questions. Aaron has some announcements, but I'll just wrap on this slide. So you could either take a screenshot if you want to get a hold of us. This doesn't have Harry's information, but obviously I know where he works. So if you get a hold of me, bring him into the conversation. I do have a QR code. Aren't these things great? So if you hit that, I'll actually leave it on the screen here for just a minute. If you want to get your phone out and hit that, that will actually bring up all my information, my LinkedIn profile, phone, email, WhatsApp, whatever you prefer. So this makes it really easy to get a hold of me. So again, thanks to the consortium. Thanks to Aaron for setting this up with us. That's really all the content that we have. I don't know how we're doing on time, or if we still want to do Q&A, or if Aaron, you want to take over the screen and do some announcements.
No, I think we have a couple of minutes if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, let's see. We had some questions in the chat. I guess it was just those ones. Cody, you'd asked about, they can come off mute. Is that right, guys?
Yep, they should be able to unmute themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, so feel free if you, rather than type the question, you can just come off mute if you want. Again, this is kind of informal. Cody, in terms of consulting side of things, I'm not sure what you mean by that. But yeah, anyone else have any questions?
Okay, well, I guess if anybody does have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Brandon and he'll field them from there, I'm sure. Well, so thanks for your presentation. Looks like some really cool stuff. That's pretty exciting. Um, Before we wrap up, I'd like to highlight a few upcoming consortium and community opportunities. Let me just share my screen here. And so the consortium recently released its 2026 salary survey report, and this provides an updated look at salaries and compensation trends across the GIS LIS community in Minnesota. This includes breakdowns by experience, job title, employment sector, technical skills, and more. You can find the full report on the consortium website. I'm just going to post the link in the chat as well. The next Women in GIS Network event is coming up on August 27th at Dangerous Man Brewing in Minneapolis. And this event is actually in collaboration with the She Talks Data Group and the Moxie Foundation. So please mark your calendars for that one. It should be a good time. And finally, our next mAppetites is scheduled for October 6th. Eric Mayat will be presenting on the development of a Twin Cities redlining story map. And how historical, contextual, and spatial data were brought together to tell a story. Sign up information on that will be available soon. Thanks again to Brandon and Harry for joining us today. And thanks to everyone who participated. Have a good day.